You have a
All right, folks, those of you joining us online, good to see you. I see we have a few comments. If you're just joining us, go ahead and put your name and where you're joining us from in the comments. This meeting is being recorded. Those of you who jumped on online probably had the alert. So, well, thank you all for coming tonight to a film screening for Saving the Dark. My name is Sammy Castongway, and I'm with Friends of the Owyhee, an Ontario-based organization that's focused on conservation advocacy, stewardship, and recreation of the Owyhee region. So tonight we have a 55-minute film screening, beautiful documentary with beautiful music and imagery. And then we'll take a short recess, and then we'll have a question and answer panel of experts for maybe a half an hour or a little bit longer, depending on questions. And then we'll go outside to the Japanese garden to do a little bit of stargazing, if you'd like. Okay. First, I'd like to begin with a kind of a short primer presentation on sort of why we're here. This is a image of, well, the nation that we live in, and also our neighbors to the north and neighbors to the south, showing light pollution. The brighter the colors are very dense light. The red, dense light, yellow, maybe less dense, green, less dense, blue, to the grayish color, and then black being very dark. So you can see here the whole eastern seaboard from basically the Mississippi River to the east is very, very bright, and we might consider that highly light polluted then. In some of these areas, like for instance, New York City, they can see about 6 stars during the year at night. So only the brightest, like Sirius, that's out this evening that we'll get to see. Okay, I see just the screen is showing. I think that's probably fine, right?
Are you sharing the screen? Sharing the screen.
Hello.
Are you sharing the screen? I think is what it is.
Just you, Sammy, not the screen.
I see. Thank you, Dawn. There we go. Misinterpreted that. There, this should help, huh? Very good. So we live here in the Treasure Valley. I'm going to use this laser pointer on our screen in here. The Treasure Valley here, it's kind of this smile that goes through, I always think about it as a smile that goes through Idaho, is really nestled right in between two of the largest and darkest continuous areas in the lower 48. So here we have the already designated central Idaho. And then, this is going wrong direction. And then here in the tri-state area of Nevada, Idaho, and the great state of Oregon, we also have a really large area of very, very dark night skies. This is known as the Oregon Outback Dark Sky region. And for a few years, we've had a coalition together for the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Project, a concerted effort to do more data collection to gather exactly how dark these skies are, using sky quality meters and also online freeware like Globe at Night. Okay, this is a more zoomed in view of this. So you can see the Central Idaho Dark Sky Reserve over here, the large bubble of light of the Treasure Valley. And then down here, the area that we're really most concerned with, here's Malheur County. And of course, we're up here in Ontario, and we're just on the tip of this really, really large, very, very dark region. And we'd like to keep it that way. So this is a film about light pollution, and then about the solutions to preventing the light from getting, or from more light pollution scattering beyond our already populated areas. So in let me minimize these things. In the official application, these are the proposed boundaries here ending at the Oregon border, and then basically these boundaries are drawn with known or already designated boundaries like roads, or here we picked out a lat lawn as we went along Crowley Road, and then picking out a lat lawn that goes across to the state border. And you might then, so that makes sense why they're all sort of jagged like this. But then why not include the rest of the county, like the rest of Malheur County all the way up here to Vail or something? And the reason is, back to this slide, this light bubble, this light pollution is extending all the way into Malheur County down here. So to only capture the darkest of the dark skies as this dark sky sanctuary, we've cut a bit of that off. So a few statistics here: 11.4 million acres within the proposed boundary. That's 2 New Jerseys or 1 Denmark. This includes portions of Lake, Harney, and Malheur counties. No incorporated cities are included. So look at Jordan Valley down here, where the boundary actually cuts right around Jordan Valley. Includes lands of 7 federal agencies, 4 state agencies, and 1 reservation. Then also 85% of this boundary, inside of this boundary, is already public land. Okay, then there's about 15% private land. Nearly 75% of that public land is BLM, okay, as many of you in the room are already very familiar with. Within the largest pristine dark sky zone in the lower 48, as shown by those last couple of images. So again, the motivation here is to preserve what we have while, of course, we still have it. And in this outreach effort into the Treasure Valley, the responsibility really lies with not the folks who are living out here in these boundaries and to say that they can't put up lights on the barn. Really, as you saw, all the light is coming from the Treasure Valley. So it's our responsibility as Treasure Valley inhabitants then to maybe ask municipalities to have ordinances to limit some of that light pollution. And we'll look at a lot of those solutions tonight through the film. For comparison, here's the Central Idaho Dark Sky Reserve with wonderful drawn boundaries and even recognized core areas. And eventually, the Oregon Outback Dark Sky will have some type of mapping like this to allow folks that are into astrotourism who are coming here for the dark skies to take pictures or just to fundamentally experience that. Maybe folks from Europe that are already, already light polluted, they can come out here and they can experience real dark night skies. But as we all know, especially those of us that are out in the Owyhee, it's dark, it's distanced from the city, and we need to be safe. So maps like this can help people find designated areas and get to these core areas safely. And then after tonight's screening, we have assembled a panel of experts to talk about this process, both what's going on here in Oregon, as well as to pull on the strength of people who have done this in the past. This isn't the first dark sky area to be proposed, right? We have the Central Idaho just on the other side of the border in Idaho, but also there's dark sky places, there's dark sky parks. There's a lot of precedence that's been set by this process. So we can learn a lot from others, and we're lucky enough to have others like Carol and John that have been, and Dawn, who have been doing this for many years. Okay, we'll save questions until the Q&A after the film, and without any more hesitancy, we'll go ahead and start our film and dim the lights. See if I can coordinate all these things just right. Anyone know how I get that bar off of there?
We get people come up here to Chabot all the time wanting to see the Milky Way. Unfortunately, we can't show it to them because of the light pollution. So more and more, it's getting to the point where the only way you can experience the night
I'd
sky.
like to
really-
pause this for a moment, folks, and try to get this bar off of here. Just because that's definitely in the way of the film. I'm going to stop that share and we'll restart it. Thanks for your patience, folks. I just want to make sure that the film is the main thing we're all seeing. And we'll just go right to that.
I don't think you can get that bar going when you're sharing.
So we'll have to just be quiet.
And I come here to be humbled.
Every year, we come out here about this time of year when it's just starting to rise,
Right.
and we all have the same response, like, "Oh, there's clouds coming in." No, that's the Milky Way.
Yeah.
For being in the middle of the night, it's kind of bright out here, and I started noticing I was casting a shadow as I was walking along. And then we look up and we realize it's because the Milky Way is so bright that it's casting a shadow.
When I look up at a sky full of stars, and my favorite is to be in those places where literally the instant your eyes lift above the horizon, the stars pop into existence. And so it's a full bowl, a hemisphere above you, just rich with stars that you feel like you could reach out and touch.
We always say that travel increases your worldview and your depth of thinking. And I guess we're kind of doing that in the maximum possible way, because we're showing people things that are so mind-bogglingly far away. We're not only showing people distance, but we're showing people time.
You're looking at the history of the Earth, you're looking at the history of our solar system, our galaxy, the universe as a whole. Every single one of these stars, all of the light that you're seeing came from some time in the past. So we're looking at basically a giant time machine. And each one of these dots that you're seeing right now, it left that star potentially millions or even billions of years ago.
For me, the charge is, whether it's just looking back like we are right now or finding it in the telescope, understanding that those photons left so long ago only to strike my eye, that is an amazing feeling. Especially when I've been looking for something, when I look at the chart that's 70 million light years away, it's like, holy cow, those photons left 70 million years ago, and if we believe the science, that's back when the dinosaurs were around, and here it is finally striking my eye.
When I am viewing the skies and I'm looking at nebula, and I'm looking at stars, and I'm looking at galaxies, and I'm looking at star clusters, I'm actually traveling through space. And so for myself, it's a way to reconcile the fact that I will never physically be in space, but through the end of my telescope, I am in fact traveling through space. I mean, how many times tonight have we all gone like, oh wow, did you see that? Whoa! Actually, how many of us put new moon on our calendars for our family so they know? And how many of us instruct family members now, don't schedule this?
Well, my two daughters got married, and both of them asked me which weekend in September could they not get married.
And it's like drug addiction, because it's a very pleasurable experience that we organize our life around and that our mood changes with.
That's right.
So
And that we spend all our money on.
Then we
Yeah,
spend-
you're right, it is a good analogy.
Yeah.
And for me, it's great because I sunburn easily, so I've got to do something that's at night. You know, so it works out great for me.
So when you do get a chance to get out to a dark sky and you look up and you see that sky full of stars, we are living in a galaxy of over 100 billion stars, over 100 billion, there's a trillion other galaxies out there. And the number of other stars, the number of other places there could be life is staggering, especially with the recent discoveries from the Kepler mission that potentially as many as half those stars you see in the sky at night, half of them could have planets. And even with pessimistic numbers, you are now starting to talk about perhaps millions, at least tens of thousands of other planets out there where there could be some form of life. And that for me is what blows my mind on a nightly basis.
We are made of stardust. We are the descendants of ancient stars in the sense that some of the elements that were fused in the interiors of those stars were incorporated into our own bodies. We are the material of the cosmos that's learned how to understand itself.
Every single generation of human beings, up until really only 200 years ago, saw a star-filled sky every single night of the year. That is what we have robbed people of today.
The viewing in Silicon Valley or anywhere within an hour of it is just, it's terrible. You can't see, other than a couple of the really bright objects, you're missing out on, well, all of this.
80% of North American and European populations no longer live someplace where they can even faintly see the Milky Way from their homes.
It's hard enough under a perfect sky to try to figure out how we fit into it all. But at least we've got a reference, you know. Without the sky, that's a huge loss.
With a star-filled sky, our ancestors developed science, the science that we have today.
Harriet Tubman took so many slaves to freedom is because she could read the sky. She followed the drinking gourd, followed the North Star.
We've made a sky in which nobody bothers to look anymore. So the North Star, that star that was a signal for those, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, for a fixed point in the sky by which to navigate. Most people today don't even know where the North Star is. I've traveled to central Los Angeles, where you can look up on a clear summer evening. I can count all 12 stars in the sky. And in fact, one of those is probably on its way to LAX, so 11 stars. When you have only 11 stars in the sky, it very quickly sends the message, there's no point in looking up. What we know about our universe has no direct bearing when all you can see in the sky is a handful of stars.
Dark places in the United States are becoming fewer and fewer. We live in the city and we're used to it. I mean, it's a shame
we are used to it.
It's a shame we can't see stars in the city. Even though, you know, I look up every night from my front porch, I look up like this and I would see 4. I would look around and see 4 stars or maybe 5. This is depressing in the city. It's so depressing. What if there was nothing but fog every day? You could drive down the street, you could only see 50 feet in front of you. You could never see a vista. You'd cross the Rocky Mountains in a fog all the time. What would you lose? It's like it would be similar.
We lose the connection, we lose the ability to understand that there are other worlds out there. We are not by ourselves. We are not the only star. We are not the only planet. And I believe we are not the only life in the cosmos.
Imagine you're out camping in the backcountry of your park and you're sleeping under the stars. And now imagine I took that sky away and I replaced it with the sky that I see back in Los Angeles. An orange glow with just a few scattered pinpricks. Wouldn't you say you've lost something? Wouldn't you say that some aspect of your enjoyment, your presence in the natural world had disappeared? Our lights that shine upwards, that create light pollution, they're robbing us of the stars overhead. And so they're robbing us of this natural view of our universe at night. So imagine a child that never got to see a tree. Well, we're doing the same thing here by raising an entire generation, and in fact creating future generations that may never see a star. And if you don't see a star, if you don't wonder about this universe overhead, and so create a world in which what you can see ends at our own atmosphere, then where is that next generation of science and scientists going to come from?
You grow up in a city and you've never experienced the night sky, and then you're told that you're living in light pollution. It's kind of like, say what? What is light pollution? What are you even talking about?
The light pollution here in the Bay Area, especially for us here at Chabot, has gotten worse over the last several years. Here at Chabot Space and Science Center, we have a 36-inch reflecting telescope, Nellie, part of a global network of observatories that search for and track near-Earth asteroids.
Asteroids and comets are still out there. We have the ability to detect them, but only if we can see them.
In order for us to see these asteroids in our images, we have to have really dark skies. A small asteroid may be somewhere around magnitude 20, which means it's 1,000,000 times fainter than the faintest star you can see with your naked eye in a really dark location. And as more and more light pollution develops, it becomes harder and harder to see those really faint asteroids. And that means we can't see the small ones even when they're close, and we can't see the big ones when they're farther away. And that's a problem. If you're trying to find a large asteroid, not hours before it hits us, but years before it hits us, you want to be able to see it even when it's pretty far away. And as light pollution increases, it becomes harder and harder to do that. And this is getting worse, and it's been getting worse ever since they started installing these new LED streetlights.
Awareness of light pollution and the problems that it's producing is the number one issue for helping solve it.
The amount of energy that's wasted through senseless lighting is a contributor to our energy consumption and our carbon footprint. It's estimated here in the United States up to 40% of the lighting that we use is wasted. It's just money down the drain.
Here in the United States, we use an awful lot of light at night. Unfortunately, we've sort of grown up in a culture of very inexpensive electricity. If you want to attract attention, you use light because it's natural at nighttime. If you see a light that's bright, you're going to look towards it. And so many retail outlets will take advantage of this, and you notice, of course, with gas stations that there's a progressive increase in the amount of light to attract interest.
The lighting under a gas station canopy is advertisement. It's see me. And if a guy puts a gas station on the opposite corner, see me more.
Some of these gas stations have higher light levels than the kinds of light you experience during the day. And how is that possible?
I have measured lighting in some service stations. It came out to 112-foot candles. When The ISNA recommended illuminance level at the pump is 5-foot candles, so over 20 times the recommended illuminance level. Think about what happens when you're in that situation, what your eye does. Well, what it's supposed to do, it torques down the iris. Think about it, it's night, and it's so bright, your pupils have to constrict. That's nuts.
There's a difference, I think, between something that screams at you and says, we're bright, as opposed to something that says, look, we're a safe environment and it's comfortable. If you would go to a gas station and say, look, you use lower levels of light, it will cause less glare and it will cause less melanopsin disruption. Please turn your lights down and do this. They're gonna laugh at you. They're gonna say, the person across the street has got 10 times as much light. So that's why you need either education where everybody agrees that this is a good standard or a good way to do business. Otherwise, you know, it's a jungle. And unfortunately, the jungle prevails right now, and any satellite map of the world will tell you that this is true. The way one entity differentiates itself on retail is to put more light in. And so you just have to take a walk through New York at night, and there's all these retail interests competing for people. It's almost like the loudest music is going to be heard first, or the brightest light is going to be seen first. Is that a good thing? People are thinking we need to provide a lot of light at night so people can see, not really understanding that they may be producing conditions of glare and discomfort which cause even more serious problems.
Consider a scenario where a convenience store a crime takes place. Their response was, we need more light because then it'll be more safe. So they put a 1,000-watt metal halide lamp up there blasting on to the area. Tell me, if they put up 2, are they twice as safe? No. Okay, then let's say there's a crime that actually takes place. Have you ever been on stage? Do you know what it's like to be on stage and you have bright light shining in your face? What can you see? Nothing. So let's say you're the responding officer. You're the cops coming into this parking lot. What are you faced with? 1,000 watts of metal halide glory blinding you, and you can't see what's in front of you. Is that safe? No, that's not. Better lighting is safe, not more lighting. So in this particular case, if they had lights that were shining down and not in the face, that way you're switching the tactical advantage back to the responding officers instead of the perpetrator. You have installed criminal-friendly lighting by putting in poorly designed knee-jerk reaction, oh, brighter means safer. That's not the case. Think about what you're doing. And in most cases, subtle, subdued lighting is a much safer situation. Even better if it could be on a motion sensor, because that way the perpetrator would trip the light, everybody notices.
If you look at most robberies or most crimes actually done during the day or done in well-lit areas. Very famous astronomer was mad because they had lit the campus where he was and they'd shine lights on the observatory where he worked. And he complained about that. And various groups said, you're for the criminals, you're terrible. We can't do anything about this. This is protecting us from crime. And so he went to the scene of every violent crime in this modest-sized city in Connecticut for 2 years and documented the lighting. And most of the crimes, robberies and assaults and murders were almost all during the day, and the ones at night were all in the areas. Took these statistics and finally got the lights taken down and not shining. He got better lights put in this campus.
The city of Chicago decided to light all of their alleys really bright. And that's where the crimes took place because criminals need a lot of light to see as well. So just throwing light at the problem is not the solution.
We waste most of the light that we install in cities by having it shine straight up into the air.
We human beings, we are not afraid of giant mutant creatures sweeping out of the dark sky to abduct us. So there is no reason we should be lighting up the sky. There's nothing up there that's bad for us to see. Rather, there is an entire sky full of stars that we would love to see. So put the light on the ground where we need it, and we can get stars and be safe.
Everything's being replaced by LEDs now. They use substantially less amount of watts to achieve the same level of illuminance.
The solid state technology offers opportunity for unprecedented levels of control. And control is both the intensity, the amount of light, the amount of light over time. So you may want to have more light in the early evening and less light late in the evening. The other interesting point is that you can make any color you want.
Critical thing is that the LEDs be a 3000 Kelvin temperature or less. Those in 3000 Kelvin have less short wavelength emission, call it less blue light. No perfect LED. There's always going to be some sort of additional blue light, short wavelength emission compared to the older high pressure sodium. Our human eye perceives the blue light much better and it appears bright. So like say in Tucson, we have switched over to 3000 Kelvin LEDs, but at the same time we dropped the illuminance level 60%. And in so doing, nobody has noticed. It still looks about the same brightness as the previous technology did. And in addition, we dim the lights even further at 11 o'clock. So it's down to 30% of what the output was with the older technology. When you do those things, you reduce the lumen output and you change the technology. There's actually less blue light going into our night sky now than there was with the previous high pressure sodium technology. City of Phoenix, they had originally specified 4000 Kelvin products, and the word got out that, wait a minute, we've heard this is not good, and they went to the city council and said, let us see what you're actually doing. So they actually put up in various places around town the different lights that they were thinking about, and had people said, come take a look, what do you think? And unanimously was, we want the warmer product. In this case, it was 2700 Kelvin.
We actually installed different color temperature lights running at different amperages on one single street and invited the community to come out and take a look. The highest color temperature running at the highest wattage and amperage was the least preferred. The lamps that were running at the lowest color temperature and lowest amperage were the most preferred.
LEDs have both promise and peril. Okay, they're not all good. You can have some LED lamps that are very cold, and the Kelvin temperature is up in the 4, 5, even 6,000 degree range. They become piercingly blue, very harsh. If you don't understand what I'm saying, have you ever driven at night and you see some cars have those headlights? Everybody knows what I mean when I say those headlights. They're despised by oncoming traffic. You're looking at 5,000, 6,000 Kelvin products because they needed that kind of temperature to get a reasonable efficacy. In the decades' time, the technology has improved so fast that it's now possible to get 2,700, 3,000 Kelvin products that will have double the efficacy of what a 5,500 Kelvin product had 10 years ago.
We're seeing a relatively rapid market transformation from HPS to LED. It's happening so quickly that I would characterize this as a rush. And in many cases, I would characterize it as an uninformed rush. And we are doing many things with lighting that we should not be doing. And this is being the press for energy savings, the press to transform our market space into LED. So what we ended up today is that we have many municipalities that have put in lights that are very glary, have the wrong color temperature, are very disturbing. There are street lights that are so uncomfortable that you have to put your hand over your eyes. It is atrocious that we have this in our environment, absolutely atrocious. So in this push, we moved very quickly from HPS, which was predominantly a yellow spectrum with very little blue into it, to a whitish blue spectrum that had an enormous amount of blue in it. And they were cheap, pushed out very quickly. We saw a lot of cities rush to this, and they got the energy savings. But unfortunately, the blue end of the spectrum for these light sources also matches up pretty closely to the melanopsin sensitivity of your eye. And the melanopsin sensitivity controls the melatonin, and melatonin is a foundation hormone that impacts many other body processes, hormonal processes.
Blue light at night is what's problematical for nocturnal habitat disruption, circadian disruption, and sky glow.
There's enough scientific evidence out there now that is saying that, light at night is probably not good for us. And it's more specifically the blue end of the spectrum.
A gentleman in Anchorage, Alaska, described to me during his test installations, it was like living under an arc welder. It was hated. It was just this piercing, high blue, ouch light.
Is completely curious to see them complaining of the blue light when the blue light is more natural for us because the blue light is the light of the day. So they see better, they have the feeling that they are more safe, more secure, but still they are not happy with this light. Our question of research was to find a way to measure the impact of street light on the quality of our sleep. The light in our street have a direct correlation with the amount of sleep that we were taking during the night. The light that we put on our head inside of the cities has a consequence during the day. You have an excessive sleepiness. People living near a big road with a big amount of light. These people were practically all sleeping after midnight. Also, if it was possible to close completely their windows with big curtains, still the effect was the same. So it was beginning probably in the evening. Blue is a problem, is our light of the day. And this is increasing our alertness. The secretion of melatonin will be delayed.
Our biology on an evolutionary basis has never seen blue light at night, ever. There's lots of studies out there showing that it's harmful for birds and animals. It upsets nocturnal behavior.
Insects are drawn towards lights, and birds and bats follow them into the cities where they exhaust themselves flying around or into towers.
Artificial light at night has not just an effect on certain species, but also on ecosystem functions. Artificial light at night keeps the pollinators away from visiting flowers and thereby reduces pollination success of plants. We found out that artificial light at night reduces the number of visits to flower by about 60%.
Dung beetles. Dung beetles use the Milky Way as a navigation point in the sky in order to roll their little balls of dung in a straight line away from other dung beetles that might want to steal it.
The dung beetles use the night sky to navigate, sort of like a buffet of compass cues to guide them along their routes.
A little insect, of course, has a very small brain, less than the size of a grain of rice. It's actually amazing that such a tiny brain can allow an insect to do such an amazing thing as navigate in a straight line.
So this idea that we humans alone use the sky above and that only we are going to be effective if it goes away is just wrong.
Artificial light at night is a major problem for birds, and it's especially a problem during migration. So migration happens in the Northern Hemisphere twice a year in the fall and in the spring. There are hundreds of millions of birds flying over New York City at night, and they're using the stars to navigate, they're using the moon to help them see things, they're using the Earth's magnetic field, they're hopping on the right winds, tailwinds to carry them in the right direction. And then they're flying along, and let's say they fly past New York City, and all of a sudden there's this big light. And birds are attracted to light. Birds do go fly to the light. And then we've seen in these very strong beams of light, like a ceilometer used in an airport or a Tribute in Light memorial that we have here every year in New York City, birds will fly to that light beam, and then they'll wind up flying around and around and around. They can't get out of it. We say they get caught in the light. Sometimes they get out on their own. Sometimes we need to extinguish the light if we can. And the problem with the light itself doesn't kill the birds. What the light does is it changes the bird's behavior. If you're changing behavior during migration, it's something the bird hadn't planned on. So it needed a little extra energy to carry it past that point. These are birds that are flying thousands and thousands of miles, sometimes without stopping, to get from one point to another. And they only have a certain amount of time to do it because their life, their offspring depend on it. And they don't have that extra energy that they carry to make a detour. And the energy that birds use is, for the most part, in the form of fat. But if you think about a person who's going on an airplane trip, you want to pack the most amount of stuff that you need in the smallest suitcase, so you don't have to carry as much. Well, it's the same thing with the birds. They want to pack on as much fat as they can without being so heavy that it costs them more to fly. So having a detour like this can have a dramatic effect on the bird's survival. What we see is birds landing in places where they didn't plan to land because they get confused and tired, exhausted. And then the next day, when the light comes up, the natural light, the birds will continue on their flight or go to sit in a tree and look for food. And what they'll do, especially in a city, is fly into glass. So either transparent or highly reflective glass. The bird thinks it's flying into a tree, but it's flying into the reflection of the tree. Or the sky, it's really flying into the reflection of the sky, and it's flying at a good clip. We find dead birds on the streets during migration. And these birds are in great condition, except that they have concussions or they have broken skulls, internal injuries from hitting a wall. About 1 billion birds die every year in the United States just from collision.
Florida is host to around 90% of all the sea turtle nesting that occurs in the United States. Not only does light confuse adult sea turtles and typically cause them to nest in lower numbers on beaches that are highly lit, it also confuses hatchling sea turtles when they come out and emerge from the nest.
The impacts of lighting show up in two different ways. One is that the adult females who are attempting to come to shore to nest are generally dissuaded from nesting where there is a lot of artificial light. You know, if you imagine this animal evolved over millions of years to return to a beach at night to lay its eggs. And a beach at night is supposed to be dark. In the modern era, turtles are returning to shore. You can imagine they're 100 meters offshore, looking at the place where they want to come up, and it's just lit up. There's all these artificial points of light. It is disorienting to them. They perceive it as a threat. And so they don't nest as much in areas where there's a lot of light. Sort of the converse is true for hatchling turtles. Here are newly emerging turtles that have never been outside of the nest, literally. They're going into the open air for the first time, and in order to survive, they must get to the water and then swim offshore and find the currents and the habitat that they can survive in. And that initial instinct on how to get to the water is influenced by several things very strongly. One of which is the slope of the beach, They tend to understand that downward seems to be the direction to go in. But even more powerful is the light. On a dark sky, even with no moon or no stars, a cloudy dark sky at night, the direction of the water is still the brightest horizon. Hatchlings have developed this instinct to go in the direction of the brighter horizon. Obviously, if towards the land is the brighter horizon because of artificial light, it attracts them, and that's what we see. In Florida alone, every year, tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 or more hatchlings are disoriented and go toward the land rather than toward the sea, and that's bad. Here's an animal that's been around for more than 100 million years and has survived through ice ages, through all kinds of environmental calamities and obstacles in the environment. And we come along, and because we want our back patio lit up and light shine out onto the beach, we're actually causing the deaths of this ancient animal that predates the dinosaurs.
Light pollution is the one form of pollution that's relatively easy to solve.
The amazing thing about light pollution, unlike all the other work that I've done previously with endangered species and migratory birds and wetlands restoration, it takes years and years, if not millennia, to restore those systems back to some semblance of what they were before. Whereas with light pollution, you literally can flip a switch and make a difference immediately.
U.S. national parks have become one of the best places to go to see a natural night sky. When the national parks did surveys asking visitors what did they find most special about visiting a national park, a star-filled sky is right up there with wildflowers, waterfalls, and wildlife.
National parks are such a great place to come and view the night skies because there's so few places left that don't have the intrusion of light pollution. If you have naturally dark places, you also have naturally wild places. So the soundscapes and the night skies are a way for us to conserve and preserve the wildness of a place. And that's important because there's so few wild places left.
Night sky talks in national parks are the #1 ranger program given across the country.
My favorite part about doing night sky programs is seeing visitor reactions. When they realize that the Milky Way is a huge streak of stars in the sky and not a cloud, the reactions are off the wall. They just go nuts.
We've got the handle here and the top of the teapot, and the Milky Way is the steam out of the teapot.
The Dark Sky Festival started in 2012. We've been doing astronomy programs in the park for a number of years before then. The festival started with just a handful of volunteers and a few telescopes, and now it's grown into a huge event where we've got multiple volunteers hosting thousands of visitors and over 40 different events throughout the weekend. We also have junior ranger astronomy programs where kids can come out, learn about the solar system, learn about some of the shooting stars and meteorites that they're going to see later that night.
Now, I need somebody who's got a really good sense of rhythm. It can give me a beat. You guys do that? Okay, so I'm going to call it out. You guys are going to call it out to me, all right? The astronomer boogaloo. We're astronomers get up in the night, oh, it's dark, huh? We don't have street lights. We don't have malls. We don't have shopping centers and all that. We just have a lot of nature, don't we? And nature doesn't have a lot of lights. There's no lights in the trees, are there? You want to say that with us, boys and girls? Are you ready? My very educated mother just served us nectarines. Nice. Okay. Let's say that again. Ready? My very educated mother just served us nectarines. Woo! No, don't show 'em. And I chant. Ready? My very educated mother just served us nectarines. Woo! Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune.
Astronomy and dinosaurs. Those are the two things that every kid seems to be fascinated by and wonder about and excited. It fires the imagination.
Watching a kid see Saturn through a telescope is one of the coolest experiences.
It excites them so much. It is a gateway to all other sciences.
But they serve as a gateway to the sciences, a gateway to wonder about our universe.
One of the great things about astronomy is that it's not a science, it's all science. Astronomy is physics, astronomy is chemistry, mineralogy, geology, meteorology, even now it's biology.
I'm really excited. We've only been doing the Dark Sky Festival for a few years, but wouldn't it be great if 20 years from now, somebody who came to the Dark Sky Festival was inspired to become a scientist or engineer at NASA because they had a chance to speak with a NASA scientist while they were here and then look through a telescope. We're seeing a rapid increase in expansion. So we have fewer and fewer wild places left. So I hope we can build that next generation of stewards to realize the value in protecting naturally wild places.
The mission of the International Dark Sky Association is to create a world without light pollution. We spend a lot of time trying to educate individuals, communities, as well as policymakers about the issue of light pollution and how they can be solved. IDA has 60 or 70 chapters around the world, and these are made up of people, individual citizens who care very, very much about protecting the night sky. We've got a really great program called the International Dark Sky Places Program, and it's a certification program, and it's very rigorous, it's evidence-based, it's scientifically grounded, that identifies the last remaining really amazing dark sky landscapes around the globe.
The goal of the program is to recognize the efforts that people are undertaking in places all around the world to try to preserve what remains of natural darkness where it still exists. We have about 85 designated international dark sky places in the world. Policy can be very effective in trying to both preserve conditions as they are, but also to even roll them back. And there's an interaction between policy and the International Dark Sky Places where we have some evidence that the efforts that are undertaken to protect the dark sky places have actually resulted in the sky getting darker.
Tucson area is known for its world-class observatories. And as the ambient light pollution increased with the growth of Tucson, the astronomy community said, we've got a problem here that we need to fix. Our two co-founders, Tim Hunter and Dave Crawford, they developed one of the most progressive lighting ordinances that controls lighting in Tucson. So it's a very dark, it's a very quiet city from a light pollution perspective.
If you look at Kitt Peak, there have been studies over the years. The quality of the skies has not deteriorated in the last 20 years.
It remains one of the darkest cities around the nation, and I think is a prime example of how light pollution can be managed without sacrificing safety.
There are many beaches around Florida where there's high density sea turtle nesting, like the Archie Carr National Wildlife Refuge, Hope Sound. It's extremely dark on the beach at night. I mean, there are homes and condominiums along that beach, but they're all using turtle-friendly lights, or else they just have turned their lights off completely on the ocean side at night. So it's quite dark on the beach. There's no evidence of increased crime because of sea turtle-friendly lighting. In fact, One of the things that people don't really understand until they experience it is that you can actually see better at night in sea-turtle-friendly lighting.
All of our exterior lighting is dynamically controlled on a local basis, where the lights will dim down considerably during periods of inactivity, and when there's people or cars or bicycles, it will ramp up. Our chief of police here, if they're doing tours around campus or around the city, if they see the lights turning on, they'll do a turn-in. Or if they see the facade of a building at full light, they know that somebody's there or has been there, and they'll take a look. And so now they actually talk about how this is contributing to the feeling of safety and security, and they're calling it their safer campus. We can get about a 70% energy savings just by putting in adaptive controls.
We've heard from a number of property owners when we've converted most of their exterior lighting to sea-turtle-friendly light, they've seen a 75% reduction in their utility bill.
Most of the big cities right now are making the switch and are going with the warmer products. Chicago has specified 3,000 Kelvin. Tucson did. San Francisco has just made that declaration.
We are upgrading 18,500 of our high-pressure sodium streetlights. We also took notice when the AMA issued their guidelines saying that cities and counties looking to upgrade their streetlights should choose LED lights that are 3,000 Kelvin temperature or below. And we're making sure that all that light is directed down. There's no light that's going up. We're lighting our streets, not lighting our skies. There are a lot of advantages to using LED lights and replacing our high-pressure sodium streetlights. LED lights in general produce a more uniform light distribution. The LED lights last longer, up to 20 years. The high-pressure sodiums last 3 to 5 years. So you're going to save on maintenance costs. The LED lights use up to 50% less energy per light. At our cost of service, we're projecting that we will save close to $1 million per year on electricity costs alone.
In some ways, it's easier to save the stars than other form of pollution. You think about it, lots of forms of pollution, like cleaning up a river or taking the carbon dioxide out of the air, is really tough. But light pollution is real simple to solve.
Don't put lights in where you don't need it. Put the right amount in the ground, shield it so it goes in the ground, and turn it off when it's not needed.
Light where you need it, when you need it, in the amount necessary, and no more.
Why pay for something you're getting no benefit out of?
A good design would not shine light up. No light should shine above the product itself.
Try to implement some type of control system.
We have a program here at the International Dark Sky Association called the Fixture Seal of Approval that provides individuals who are looking for ways to make a difference at their home or in their community a wide variety of products, which can be found on our website.
There are 3 different features that we can adjust to make the light less disoriented. One is to bring it closer to the ground. If we lower that light physically, then less of it reaches the beach itself. The other is to keep it shielded so that it's really focused on only those areas where we need it. There's no reason to light up the whole sky or have light shine out onto the beach. Sort of more on a technological basis, longer wavelengths of light tend to disorient turtles less. Every one of the places where we have retrofitted lights and there was disorientation before, there has been no disorientation after.
We have grant money to pay for the fixtures and the bulbs for lighting retrofits. You'd be surprised that sometimes we also get declined.
The number one response when you start talking to property owners is, oh, well, how am I going to be able to see?
They have a safety concern. They have a fear of losing light.
Is it going to make my property more vulnerable to crime? Those are natural responses, especially natural when people have never encountered sea turtle friendly lighting.
In many cases, they hear, oh, turtle friendly lighting means it's going to be dark. And that's not the case. It's just you have to experience what the light is going to be like. It's of the same spectrum that was the lighting for the Golden Gate Bridge for decades.
For New York City Audubon's Lights Out program, we ask buildings to turn their lights out after midnight. It hasn't been a tremendous success because we only have about 100 buildings in the entire city of New York that sign on to turn their lights out for birds. It's interesting, you'd think that people would want to turn their lights out. It's like a no-brainer, right? Turn the lights out, save money. Why are the lights on anyhow? There's no one in the building. But there is pushback, and you get pushback by all kinds of reasons or explanations, like, well, we don't know who turns the lights out, or our cleaning people need the lights on, or it's a safety issue to keep lights on at night. All those issues I can acknowledge, and they can all be worked around. Cleaning people need the lights on when they're cleaning, and they can turn the lights out when they leave the room. Or for safety, to have a motion sensor light, so when people are moving around, then the light lights up. And that's going to make a signal to people that there's someone moving around where they're really not supposed to be.
It's part of the city to me to not have the night sky. It's always surprising to me if I can see something at all. So to me, it's not like I'm disappointed that the city doesn't have the night sky. What I am concerned about is that the cities will overwhelm the parts of the world that can see the night sky.
Light knows no boundaries. It travels forever.
Spreading the word to those bigger cities, while they might be really far away, the impact that they have on the natural darkness here at Lassen is pretty significant. So we hope that folks visiting from San Francisco and Reno and Sacramento will go back and realize that the little things that they can do to reduce the light impact in those big towns actually will make a difference here at Lassen.
People who are unfamiliar with our organization and they hear dark sky and we want to turn off all the lights. No, that's not the case. Our name says dark sky. It doesn't say dark ground. You can have both. There's no reason why you can't have excellent lighting and still see the stars. I live in Tucson, a municipality of over 1 million people, and I live 7 miles from the city center, and I can see the Milky Way from my driveway every night. There's no reason why that can't be the case everywhere.
Looking for asteroids, that's planetary defense. That's trying to protect the human race from potential impacts. And we know that those impacts have happened in the past. We know that the dinosaurs were wiped out by the asteroids. So, there's some practical importance to it as well. But the other thing is, it's just the basic desire to know. You look out there among the stars, you see what's out there, you want to understand it. You want to know, how did it get there? Are we alone?
By eliminating light pollution, by reducing that, we give the birds a better chance to see the stars. And the stars is what they're using to navigate with.
We humans are smart enough to figure out how we're impacting the rest of the planet and other forms of wildlife, and take relatively modest actions to give these animals a chance to survive.
So if you do these simple things of shielding, lower wattage, lower power LEDs, and oranger, yellower LEDs, we can get the stars, we can be safe, we can save electricity, we can save natural resources. We can do all of this, and we get that sky full of stars. It's a win-win, win-win situation. We can all benefit from this and live in an industrial, technological world perfectly safe and see the Milky Way once again the way everyone used to.
The majority of LED products that are being used in the change-out are dark sky friendly design. So this change in technology will actually accelerate the improvement.
Shielding a light has an immediate effect. You don't have to wait for the environment to respond to it, because it will begin responding immediately. And the number of times that I've had interactions with people in my line of work where I explain this to them, or I give them a demonstration and I show them how easy the solution is, the response that I get more often than not is people say, I had no idea. I didn't realize. It's awareness. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is, again, to change this human notion about what light at night is and what it can do. And we start by building awareness that there's a problem, under the belief that when enough people realize that it's a problem, they will then demand a solution. And I foresee that time is coming, and it's probably going to happen sooner than we think.
What do you like about looking at the night skies or being under, seeing so many stars?
It makes me feel peaceful because we have like a really big world and the universe is so vast. And when you look at the night sky, you can kind of get lost in it. It feels really magical because everyone's doing it together.
For different galaxies, and different galaxies for different solar systems.
Some of them don't even exist anymore. It's just the light from the one.
You're absolutely right.
What's your favorite planet?
Mars. My favorite planet is Neptune.
Neptune?
My favorite is Mars.
Why?
Because my favorite color is red, and I kind of like the explosive dust that's on Mars. Like in New York, they probably wouldn't be able to see the stars because everyone always has lights on. There's big posters with lights around them, and there's street lights. So.
Oh, wonderful, folks. I hope you enjoyed and feel illuminated in the heart, of course. Let's go ahead and move on to our panel. If you need to take a short recess, the bathroom is down the hall. Check that chat real quick. Okay. Actually, I should check to see if everyone's here. Let's see. Okay, great. Well, we have Bob Hackett, and Bob is the Executive Director of Travel Southern Oregon and is the state's leading champion for developing and promoting dark sky tourism, particularly in the Oregon Outback. So happy to have Bob. And then I also, Sammy Castonguay will also have a question and be here for further questions and stargazing. You all know me, but I'm a geologist and program manager for Friends of the Owyhee, a strategic partner, it says here, which is great, with the Oregon Outback Dark Sky Sanctuary team, and also teach astronomy at Treasure Valley Community College. And then Don Nilson. Don is a longtime dark sky advocate, the Dark Sky Preservation Director for Rose City Astronomers, and a professional natural resource planner. And she is the project manager and author for the Outback nomination. Dawn's been very busy the last couple of years on this, on all details. And then we also are joined by Carol Cole. And Carol started out as a Forest Service representative working on the advisory group to establish the Central Idaho Dark Sky Reserve, and is currently the Idaho Dark Sky Alliance Board President. And then also featured in the film, we are joined by John Barentine. And John is an astronomer, light pollution researcher, and freelance environmental consultant who previously led conservation programs and public policy initiatives at the International Dark Sky Association. So I'm gonna let Dawn go ahead and ask the questions here. I'm going to turn off my screen share and allow the...
Great, thanks.
Great.
All right. Well, I put together a few questions for our panelists in advance to speak more directly to what we've been doing in Idaho and Oregon. But before we begin those few questions, I wanted to just alert people to a new study that was just published in the journal Science. And that study reports that between 2011 and 2022, global sky brightness increased by 9.6% per year. And that study's based on data that's collected through the community project Globe at Night. The author gives an analogy that if you thought about someone born today who could see 250 stars by the time of their 18th birthday, if we had a trend at that same rate, and hopefully not worse, he would only see 100 stars. So that's pretty alarming news. And I would say that's a call to action. And so these questions that I've prepared are really to address that call for action. And so my first question is for John, and you might recognize him as one of the stars in the film. And so John, in the film, you specifically state, policy can become effective in trying to both preserve conditions as they are, but also to even roll them back. There's an interaction between policy and the International Dark Sky Places program, where we have some evidence that the efforts that are undertaken to protect the dark sky places have actually resulted in the sky getting darker. And so my question for you is, can you name 1 or 2 places where there is evidence of improvement? And can you please share what types of policies those places adopted that communities within the Treasure Valley area of Oregon and Idaho might pursue to not only stave off further light pollution in our region, but possibly gain a darker sky?
That's a great question, Dawn. And first of all, thank you. Thanks to the organizers for having me here tonight. There's evidence for more than just a couple of places, as it turns out. We have some evidence from satellite data that establishing international dark sky places at least correlates with decreased light emissions in the surrounding areas. So there's some research that was published in 2021 that looked at 98 communities that are in and around these areas, and they found that the light seemed to decrease by about 2% each year after the place received its accreditation. But when they looked at communities that were further away, they saw essentially no change during that same study period. So it's a limited result, but it suggests that the policy changes that are being undertaken in those communities to reduce lighting consumption to protect the certified places is actually working as it's intended. As to the kinds of policy changes that seem to produce the kinds of measurable results that we're looking at, they're really quite simple. Shielding outdoor light fixtures and ensuring that the light is aimed down is the most important way to attack the problem that we know of. It's definitely the most effective. Close second to that is limiting the duration each night that the lighting is used with devices like timers and motion sensors. And we can even further reduce those light emissions by lowering the light levels when they're too high for the task, or removing lights that are unnecessary altogether. And the goal is to really carefully tailor the use of that light at night, and to avoid the waste that results from applying light where it's not needed. An example of this, just briefly, where it's shown to work is right here in my hometown, which is Tucson, Arizona, where we reduced the brightness of the night sky by about 10% when our city government converted our public street lighting to LED a little more than 5 years ago. And in that transition, we reduced the output of the new street lighting system by about 60% compared to the earlier system it replaced. So when these policy ideas are implemented properly and consistently, we know that darker night skies actually result. And we know from our own experience here that we can do it without causing problems for public safety or nighttime amenity.
Excellent. And when we're talking about, 2% decrease a year, when we're looking at trends of 9.6% increase a year, that's a great statistic. Thanks, Don. The next question is for Carol Cole. The Central Idaho Dark Sky Reserve spans a few jurisdictions, just a few. Sarcastic. What types of dark sky policies have been implemented in the various jurisdictions within the reserve? What type of concerns were expressed, if any, when proposing and adopting those policies? And have you been able to discern if those policies have been effective?
Yeah, thanks for that, Dawn, and thanks for everybody else. I love the film every time I see it, so it's quite inspiring. But yeah, so to your question, we were lucky here that we were in both a pretty dark spot, to be able to establish a dark sky reserve, but also we were in an area that had some pretty good groundwork already laid before we started that process. We had a very active volunteer dark sky advocate here in the Wood River Valley in Central Idaho, who had worked with the communities, all of the communities, Ketchum, Sun Valley, Haley is not in the reserve, but just right adjacent, Blaine County, the city of Stanley, all of the various representative communities, and they all already had dark sky ordinances in place when we were going for our designation. So they were all finished from the mid 90s to I think the last one came in about 2017, just when we were getting established. So that was really good that we had very supportive communities, very supportive residents. Most of the land, I think we saw that in the map earlier that was there, most of that land is National Forest System land. Of the 900,000 acres, like 750,000 is actually within the Sawtooth National Recreation Area. And then the other communities are around that. So, so we were pretty lucky that we had that. So there's not a lot of light pollution there. But what we didn't have with all of those entities, we had 2 major counties plus 2 other ones, 5 cities and the Forest Service, a couple different national forests actually. But what we didn't have was kind of that central coordination. So we ended up also putting together an MOU with those entities to make sure that we were able to coordinate that effort without that kind of central lighting plan or ordinance that covered the whole area. So I think that was important. And, I think it did make a difference. We need to get better at monitoring the changes that have been made and the lighting improvements that have been made in those various areas. But our sky quality has stayed, pretty much the same, but it was down a little bit this year. I'm sorry, up a little bit, I guess, this year from when we were designated. So we're staying pretty good with that. And yeah, so I think it's been a success. Didn't get a lot of pushback. I mean, different people have different options and different opinions, but we were, there were some people that had questions. They were concerned about overreach and regulations and all of that. And so far we've been successful to do most of the compliance work through just education and voluntary changes. I mean, we do have the ordinances to back that up, but most of that has just been through education. And that's kind of what was said in the film. And I think John said that as well. It's just letting people know.
Thanks, Carol. And for those, for those watching, the Central Idaho Dark Sky Reserve is the first reserve in the United States. We have a few others now, but it was the first. And it's the first for a reason, because we have quite a bit of bureaucracy here in the US, and we just do things differently than some other countries that put together reserves. This question's back to you again, John. And John is someone who's been involved in several different lighting retrofits, at least 2 that I know of, Tucson and Salt Lake City, and maybe others. And so the question for you, given your whole background in these streetlight retrofits, streetlights really are one of the biggest sources of light pollution out there. So that's an important thing to address. What concerns did you hear from those communities on the retrofits, and how does the community feel about the current changes? Was there difficulty finding vendors who could supply the desired lights? And have there been measurable improvements, including factoring in the blue light from LEDs?
Well, the outcome in those 2 cities were a little bit different, in part because the actual changes that were made and how the cities communicated that change to their residents differed. Tucson is rather different than Salt Lake City for a variety of reasons. And I think it's in part as it goes with this issue that our citizens are a little more sensitized to the importance of dark skies. As it turns out, astronomy and space science are significant contributors to our economy here in Southern Arizona. And I would guess that most Tucsonans understand that limiting that light pollution is really essential to keeping this region favorable for that type of industry. The city of Tucson started consultations with both the residents and the astronomers long before it bought any of its lighting products that it put in, and it committed to ensuring that the new lighting would not increase light pollution. And even at that time, which was almost 10 years ago now, finding vendors really was not an issue, surprisingly. The public acceptance of the lighting has been quite good here. Shortly after the installation was complete, I spoke to the project manager with the city about how many complaints he'd received about the color or the brightness of the new lights. And he holds up 2 hands and he says, fewer than I can count on 10 fingers. And that's not bad for a city of about 500,000 people and a metro area that's even bigger. Salt Lake City started rolling out its new LED street lighting system in earnest really only in the past few months. So it's a bit early to make judgments about how it's going. Unlike Tucson, there's no astronomy industry in the area to be concerned about. But I would say that the public sensitivity to dark skies generally is higher than in Utah than in most of the Western states. And the city government really committed to the idea of getting things done right. As it started the slow initial rollout a few months ago, they've since had some concerns about people in some residential neighborhoods about glare from the new lights in particular, as well as their color. So the city started making changes to its lighting master plan that lowered that brightness, made the color a little bit warmer, and added some additional shielding. So listening and reacting to that kind of feedback is really important to achieving public acceptance in most places. I think that's really a recurring theme. But it's as important to educate the citizens and invite their participation really in the earliest phases of these projects, so you don't end up stuck with really terrible lighting if you purchase the entire stock at once.
Thanks a lot, John. This next question is for a few of our panelists. This is for Bobby, Sammy, and I'll answer myself. What has driven your particular organization to be so engaged in the dark sky preservation effort, particularly with the effort to nominate dark sky places? And what sources of engagement have you found to work well for your community members? And let's start with you this time, Bob, in your role with Travel Southern Oregon.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I am with Travel Southern Oregon, which is our regional DMO for the state of Oregon for Southern Oregon, which includes the Crater Lake area and also that vast area out in the Outback in Lake County. Sammy, is working in another part of that Outback that expands all the way to the Idaho border. And so what's interesting about the dark sky space is that you see a lot, astronomers and scientists and wildlife biologists, and then increasingly, I think the whole movement is seeing tourism sort of come in as partners, because research from the Colorado Plateau that they did in 2019 really examine the economic lift that happens in areas where people are visiting for night sky visitation. And it's a 300% higher spend in a community for people who are doing night sky viewing. Now, it's not rocket science, because you have to spend the night to see the sky, right? Which includes a dinner and a breakfast. And so this is very sustainable economic impact. It's very community appropriate. Communities get to decide how to engage with dark sky work as well. And in our particular place in Oregon in Lake County, there are very few people. And so to create sort of in our world, our tourism world, sort of a destination development asset that is perpetually renewable, that actually helps all kinds of other partners with conservation and wildlife protection and those kinds of things. We have found bringing together partners, which is what we do in tourism, like Carol, Forest Service, BLM, counties, cities, tribes, all kinds of people. That's just what we do when we're working with trails, when we're working with all kinds of different things in the tourism space. So that muscle's easy for us to flex, and it's been a real pleasure. The area that we're working in the Outback is very vast, and so the right approach. Dawn and Sammy and I have been working for a couple of years now, and we're dialing in, how we can get everybody on board with this resource that is so pristine. I mean, you're seeing my picture here. This is night sky at Heart Mountain. These skies are, at 22 all the time, and there's just no lights out there. So to turn that into an economic impact for an area that residents feel like is theirs and makes them proud of their legacy as well in this lived in environment is a real plus for us. So it's work that I love doing every day. And so you see a lot of the great partners here.
Thanks, Bob. He really has been, and his advocacy for dark skies has really broadened beyond just Southern Oregon and has really caught the state's attention. And now we have some really big statewide effort going on. And Sammy, do you want to answer the same question on behalf of FOTO?
Yes. The Friends of the Owyhee, of course, were concerned with this really large area, 7 million acres of the watershed and 2 million acres of the Owyhee front. And this region of southeastern Oregon and of course Idaho and Nevada is really at the core of this larger dark sky area. Really, probably the core is a little bit over towards the Steens, but we're right on the edge of that. And as you know, Tim and I have been engaging in this work over the years, and many of you also as friends, camping and being out there under the dark night sky. The dark night sky has been cited as one of those reasons why the Owyhee is special, right? Again, like they said in the film, imagine being out there camping under the wonderful sky, and then imagine that not being the case. And I think here at Friends of the Owyhee, we feel strongly as a land conservation organization that's involved in advocating for permanent protections of the land. We are thrilled to also be teaming with a sky preservation, ultimately to preserve another part of this landscape that is just like the ground beneath our feet and the rocks and the plants. It's just as holistically part of why we are out there. And then you ask about some of our interaction with the community and efforts, and we've done stargazing webinars over the last few years that have been very successful, both here in the community and with libraries like Vail and McDermott, Nevada, actually. And then also, just like tonight's activity after the Q&A, is we're going to go outside and do stargazing out in the Japanese garden. And here in Ontario, we are lucky enough that it is still pretty dark, and we can see a lot of these wonderful stars and constellations. So these hands-on type of stargazing activities with our community have worked really well, but also other multimedia like the webinars work well too. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun engaging with our community around the dark night sky. It's just so easy, right? It's so fun, it's so heart-filling. But yeah, good question, Dawn. Thank you.
As someone who's in Portland, who goes out observing as an amateur astronomer, I tell you, I get so depressed after I leave a starry night and come back to the city. I just feel like I'm just being gypped. You don't know how great you folks have it out there, or at least you won't until it's gone. So, from the perspective of RCA, and we're a membership of over 1,000 members, one of the largest astronomy clubs in the US. On behalf of RCA, our interest in getting engaged in this is, of course, because we want to save those stars that we enjoy observing and studying. As an IDA delegate and as a co-founder of IDA Oregon, I'll share that IDA itself was formed by a group of astronomers wanting to save the stars. And like Bob said, the movement has grown to include tourism and wildlife conservation and even the humanities, the arts and sciences. But astronomy really still is one of the major players in the movement's success. And I think we'll continue to have that place. One thing that we do and that everybody can do to get involved is every RCA member, every dollar of every RCA membership each year goes to IDA. So depending on the size of our membership, that's a donation we make as a club to IDA. And then we have many, many individual members to IDA. And so that's one of the easiest things that anybody can do. For me personally, light pollution hit my radar back in 2008, 2009. And as soon as it did, I immediately jumped on the advocacy bandwagon. And not just as an amateur astronomer, but as a professional natural resources manager. I just, the notion that something like light pollution could be an added stressor to all the many stressors that that life on Earth already goes through was just not happening under my watch, so to speak. And so, my outreach effort was what I knew, and that was the regulatory world. And so I began reaching out to all the city bureaus, putting together a symposium at our Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, where stakeholders were invited throughout the region. And we had over 150 people attend that meeting. And that began the conversation. And it was intentional because the city was just gearing up to start its update to the general plan. And the general plan really becomes the foundation of what codes, the city adopts thereafter. Regulatory matters, political matters aren't everyone's bailiwick, and certainly not for most of our membership, which is technical expertise is great amongst an astronomy club. So, recognizing that even with rules and regs, it often takes about 10 years before people even know that there's a code out there for something, that there's a law out there. And so to have more immediate effect, we've really just focused on what we did well, and that's more the outreach. And we do a variety of outreach, including, I lead evening bat walks. Whatever's going to bring attention to the subject is what we do. And I just wanted to add that, it was pretty evident early on that the Dark Sky Places program was really having a significant effect on outreach. So in February 2019, our board adopted an initiative that we would help designate, or help nominate Dark Sky Places in Oregon. And then as the Oregon IDA's first chair, I encouraged the board, the IDA board to adopt that same initiative in its strategic plan. And so here we are since 2019, with now 2 certified dark sky places in Oregon, an IDA and RCA working on other dark sky parks, dark sky communities, an urban night sky place, and what would be the largest sanctuary in the world, if not the largest dark sky place in the world, right here in southeastern Oregon. I wanted to say this film that you just saw, I think, is one of the most effective outreach tools out there. It's a great film. It just shares the whole comprehensive, view of what this movement's all about in such a great way. And when I first saw the film, I was on a panel with the filmmaker at an eco film festival. And I vowed immediately after seeing it that I would make an effort to host it to as many public screenings as I possibly could. And then COVID hit. And so tonight is the 6th screening. Not so bad given that we've had a long time pandemic, but I'm hoping, we'll be able to do many more such screenings. And I'm hoping that the folks in the audience and folks that will watch this later will take the initiative to screen this with their local representatives, with their colleagues, just to get the word out there and to use this film as a tool. And if you want to have a good example of how effective a tool this film is when, and I was at that meeting when the mayor of Portland voted to adopt the dark sky strategy that will be the precursor of our now pending outdoor ordinance, our outdoor lighting ordinance. And he said that it was upon seeing this film that someone sent him a link to that he knew that something had to be done in Portland and that we needed to act soon. That person was me, who sent that link to him and invited him to these screenings. And in case he didn't make it, to forward it. So everybody can do something. And with that, I'll just turn it back to Sammy and we'll take any questions from the audience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that important story there, Dawn. I think that is really, really powerful. You know, if the mayor of Portland saw it and really saw that, I think that, you know, here sharing it as much as we can. So it's time for questions from the audience. That's both online and here in person. I'll look for any chats that pop up if Terry, Monica, or Beth, if you have a question.
Do we know what Boise's view, like their city council's view has been on this? I noticed when I was leaving Boise recently, and there's a new facility for a golfing type facility that was incredibly lit up, and it was so bright that I found it difficult even driving on the freeway, and it really alarmed me because I was like, hey, even more lighting, you know. So have you heard anything about how they are operating with that?
I don't know, but Carol might know best. Do you mind if I call on you, Carol?
Sure. Thanks for that question. I know exactly the facility you mentioned. It just opened, I guess. I live up in Haley, but I get down to Boise occasionally. And I noticed it when we were there along the freeway. And then I heard on the news, it was a couple weeks later, that when it actually opened and they turned on all the lights, that they did get some complaints. And my understanding was it was the glare on the interstate, you know, more so than the amount of lighting or whatever. But yeah, it's places like that that I think make it more important for people in the Treasure Valley. I don't know where the questioner lives, but you know, for people in the Treasure Valley to go to the Boise City Council or Meridian, or you know, whatever city you're in, Eagle and Nampa and all of those, and just make it known that this is something that you're concerned about. A couple of our board members met with the Boise mayor a couple weeks ago, and just kind of had an introduction to kind of start that conversation. But you know, we're not her constituents. It will be a lot more effective if people that actually live in the area, you know, kind of bring that up as a question. So that's kind of the best I have. I know that Boise does not have an ordinance, but I don't know where they are in terms of working toward it, or if it's even on their, you know, radar screen at this point. But we can put it there. You can put it there.
Yeah, inspirational answer. I think that is a duty of all of ours in each of our respective municipalities to start that conversation with city councilors. Any other questions from the audience? Larry?
I'm wondering if there are any dark sky ordinances, model ordinances, that we might be able to take a look at. A lot of the time, I know if you go to a city council, if you say, this is what we would like you to do, and you've given them something that's all laid out, and they can go over it and use it as a core ordinance to be able to adopt themselves, it goes a lot easier than expecting a city to have to adopt something out of whole cloth that they don't have any model to use in connection with.
Carol's got
and let's have both Carol and John, because John's been involved with the MLO that IDA had, and then Carol more directly right there in Idaho.
And I was going to say that I wanted to turn it over to John because he knows a lot of the other ones. The ones I'm familiar with are the ones, you know, for Ketchum and Haley and Sun Valley, which are fabulous ordinances, and they're pretty dialed into, you know, 3000 Kelvin or 2700 or whatever, but they're for pretty small municipalities. And I am not that familiar. I know that the IDA website has some models, and I know John is really familiar with those. So I'll let you go.
Yes, exactly. And you both mentioned the MLO, which stands for Model Lighting Ordinance, that was developed by IDA, and the Illuminating Engineering Society, which is the professional organization for people who do lighting design and engineering. So it's very technically sound, and it's freely distributed to the public. As Carol mentioned, many of the dark sky communities throughout the world, and especially here in the US, they tend to be smaller cities and towns. Any of those, if you look at their ordinances, which you can get through the IDA website, any of those is a good model for a smaller community. If you're talking about a bigger place, we're now getting into something more the size of Boise. We might look at something like the Tucson Pima County ordinance that we have here, which is shared jointly between our biggest city and the surrounding county, which I think is one of the best in the country for a city of our size. And then you have these sort of mid-sized cities that might be anywhere from 25 or 30,000 up to potentially 100,000 people. And I would point to, as an example, Flagstaff, Arizona, which now is a community of nearly 80,000 people. And you can stand in downtown Flagstaff and look up in the night sky and you can see the Milky Way. So their lighting ordinance is very effective. It just went through a revision cycle. So it's shiny and brand new. We're about to go through a revision cycle here in Tucson. But the long and short of it is that we've got good models for communities of different sizes and circumstances. And I'm sure, anybody who wanted to do one of these in their own community, we could find a good model for you.
Yeah, and I'll add that the newer, the better, because we've learned a lot too over the years. The earlier the model the model lighting ordinances didn't even address blue light, and now we know the significant effects of blue light. So you want to find something that's been done in the last few years to be sure that it really is addressing all the key issues of light pollution.
Yeah, very good question. Any other questions from the audience? Don't see anything in the chat over here. Okay. Any of you?
All right.
One more.
Yeah, Larry's got another question.
Okay.
What sort of funding might be available to a small community that wants to adopt one of these ordinances to help pay for the cost of switching over to different lighting systems? Is there any money available to one of these places if they want to be able to tap into some money?
Well, there's not much there. If this was 10 years ago or so, I would have had a better answer for you, because there was some federal money that resulted from the recovery from the Great Recession that was funding lighting retrofits in a lot of cities. They wanted to try to make America more energy efficient. There is, I don't know the details, there is some money in the Infrastructure Act that Congress passed a couple of years ago. And there's also some money in the American Rescue Plan Act that was part of the COVID recovery. I don't know the specifics on how much or exactly what it can be spent on, but the Infrastructure Act in particular is a potential source of federal money. Beyond that, it's admittedly tough. There are not a lot of private foundations that fund this sort of thing, but they do exist out there. But if you have to go make the case, the argument is always, a little bit of investment up front is going to pay off in the long run. You're going to lower your electricity costs. You're going to have fewer lights to do the same job if you do justice by dark skies. And in the big picture, long run kind of scenario, it's going to be better for your community.
Yeah, and in Oregon, we have Bonneville Power Administration and Bonneville, and it depends on, if you're somebody like Pacific Power or Idaho Power, and I think you get Idaho Power there in Ontario, and they can tap into Bonneville Power Administration funds for folks that are towns that are part of the co-op, like Harney Cooperative. That works a little different. So it really depends who your electric provider is in Oregon, of where the funding comes from. And what John said, it's all in the maintenance fee. So there's that upfront cost of replacing the lights, but once you put them in, not only do you save money on the energy, but you also save tons of money on the maintenance, because you don't have to go out and change the light all the time. They last for 25 years. And so I think I saw something where your payoff happens within 2 years. So a place like the city of Davis retrofitted all their lights, thousands of street lights. The folks didn't like what they did. They went back 2 years later and they retrofitted them again to be even a warmer color. And it still was affordable, because the amount of money that's saved by the cities to do these retrofits is that great.
Looks like Bob has his hand up and also has a comment.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share in Oregon, another option, and Dawn and I've talked about this. We haven't actually gone for it yet, but the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has habitat preservation and recreation grants that sort of merge this idea of recreation and habitat conservation. And while it may not serve as a municipal, refit on a citywide level, if there are park areas, if there are, sort of partnerships with maybe groups like FOTO and a city, that kind of thing, there may be, and you're in Oregon, there may be some interface with this Department of Fish and Wildlife habitat recreation grants, and there's quite a pool of money there right now. So
yeah, interesting, Bob. Yeah, we're definitely aware of that ODFW funding, but hadn't necessarily thought it in that way. So that was good, good creative answer. Any other questions from the audience? You three ladies in the back, do you have any questions, or you're just ready to stargaze, huh? Yes, they say. So, well, thank you all very much, both attendees here in-house, attendees here online, those folks that registered that weren't able necessarily to make it, but this is recorded, and we'll distribute that recording to folks that have also registered online and otherwise. And then panelists, thank you all very much for taking the time to bring your expertise to the table. It's really nice to have things like this, both in person and in our digital world today, to have access to folks like John and Carol and Rose and Dawn that are so far away, and Bob, that we can be all here in the same room and benefit from their expertise. So thank you all very much, and we'll let you go for the evening.
Thanks. Enjoy the stars. We're into it.
All right. Have a good night, folks. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks all. Have a good night.